And welcome again to Theories of Reality. All right, let's get started here. So we're going to finish up talking about history of philosophy and Socrates, and then move right into talking about the mind-body problem. So make sure we don't fall behind, as sometimes happens. I get carried away talking about stuff, or we have great conversations about this and that, and then it's like, uh-oh, we got a test coming up, got to finish this stuff up. So, oops, that's not what I want. I need to go back to last term. And I think, oops, actually I want to go into the middle of class. Anybody have any questions from last time? Particularly about like the correspondence theory of truth. I want to make sure everybody's got that, thinking about that. If you have questions or comments about, that's like super foundational to everything we're doing. Oh, what the heck. I need to put like a shortcut on here. So, what's truth?
That which corresponds with reality.
Right. So, and then so what is it that corresponds with reality? What is truth a quality of?
Knowledge.
So truth is a component of knowledge, but it's not a quality of knowledge. Okay, observations are what your beliefs are based on. Oh, I just answered it. So truth is a quality, like what things are true?
Things you believe that correspond with reality?
Yeah, so things you believe. So so a belief, a statement, or a proposition. Test my multitasking skills there. I cheated. The things that are true, like truth is a quality of belief statements and propositions. So a proposition is sort of the abstract thing that's true or false. And then a proposition can be expressed as a belief. So you can have like a belief in your mind. It can be expressed as a statement, verbal or written. It could be expressed in a particular language, in which case it's a sentence, right? And then you can have the same statement can be expressed with two different sentences. So you could say, I speak French, or I could say je parle le français, right? And those would be equivalent statements. They would express the same meaning, just in different languages. And it could be, if it's written down, it's a written statement. It can be a verbal statement if I speak it. But those are all representations of the same, we might say, idea. An idea or a concept is different than a proposition. Like the concept of justice isn't a proposition. And the concept of justice isn't really a belief or a statement. Now, if you say something like, well, I believe there is such a thing as justice, maybe that's a proposition. But a proposition has to be a declarative statement. You have to just say something is true about the world. If I'm just talking about the concept of justice, there's no sort of truth or falsity to that, because it's not a belief or a statement. But if I say there's no justice in this world, then that's a statement that's either true or false, and will depend on how the world is, whether it's true or false. Let's see what else about that. So then, truth is a quality of statements, beliefs, or propositions, which corresponds with the reality. A statement is true if and only if it describes the world the way it actually is. So this is distinction between appearance and reality, between belief or perception and the way things actually are. And this is like a fundamental distinction. This is the basis of all intellectual inquiry. You can't have an intellectual discussion without talking in terms of the objective world, the objective reality, and truth and falsity. And all of science is based on this. even including the social sciences, is based on this fundamental concept of objectivity. And how do you figure it? And then the question is, well, who gets to decide what's true? And that question is just wrong in so many ways. Sometimes there are bad questions. So that question assumes there's some authority figure that sort of hands down the truth to you. And the idea of how you figure out what's true is through reason, evidence, investigation, hard thinking, and testing hypotheses in science, doing taking in information from a variety of sources, and say things like history or maybe politics, right? So it's a combination of empirical investigation and then sort of processing things, thinking of things in terms of these higher order concepts, and try to get a handle on what the world's like. And that's again the basis of all science and all academic inquiry is the search for the truth. And this goes all the way back to Socrates. Socrates is the father of philosophy. He had this student named Plato that wrote down all of his stuff and then added to it as time goes along. And then Plato has a student named Aristotle who starts his own school. And this is where we get this idea of the academy, and academia comes straight from the ancient Greeks. So this is just sort of an extension of the first institutions of higher learning in ancient Greece. Let's see. And Plato's school is called the academy. That's where you get academia from. Let's go back to the Greeks here. So make sure to read the handouts. What is truth here? Just one handout, I guess. I didn't go over it entirely. I'll just ask one more question. So how is knowledge different from truth? So truth is that which corresponds with reality. So say you have a true belief. What's the difference between a true belief and knowledge?
Facts.
Well, the facts will say whether your belief is true or not. So what might be an example of? Somebody give me an example of a belief that you have that you assumedly believe to be true. Like to say, this is a weird thing in language. To say you have a belief is to say that you think something's true. So what was the example of a belief?
The universe is infinite.
The universe is infinite, right? So that's a belief. And then the question is that something that you know, or is that a belief that you have that you don't know? Now, a part of the definition of knowledge is it's got to be true, but it's also have to have something else with it.
It has to be supported by evidence.
Exactly, it has to be supported by evidence. So that's justification, rational justification. So the question is there evidence that the universe is infinite? And actually, most modern physics says the universe is finite. So at least the universe we inhabit. So because there's lots of evidence to the contrary, people would say, well, that belief might be given our best evidence, that belief is probably false, and therefore it can't be known because there's no such thing as false knowledge. One might be something that's a little more pedestrian, like think about a belief. What about a belief that you might know to be true?
You can't run a red light.
You can, but you might get a ticket. I suppose it's against the law to run a red light. There you go. So and that's something that like you might believe that's true, and it turns out that you could like show justification. You could look in the requisite law books and see what the penalties for it are and everything. So that's not just a true belief. It's also known because there's evidence or justification for it. Maybe something a little more. Like if you say something like, well, I know Salem is the capital of Oregon, say. And you're talking to some somebody from the East Coast and they think it's Portland because Portland's the big city, and maybe you say, well, it's not like New York, where New York City is the capital of New York. We have this podunk town in the middle of the state that's the capital. It's not Portland. And they'd say, oh yeah, well you're wrong about New York. It's actually Albany's the capital. This is podunk town in New York that's the capital of New York. And I say, really? And then they show me evidence, like they show me a map or an atlas or Wikipedia or whatever it is, and that's proof that the belief is true. Now there's some things that we may not know, like we may not know. There's anybody taking a class here where the professor talked about some theoretical issue that maybe we don't know why or how or what causes something.
There's plenty of those.
Yeah, it seems like science is filled with those things. We're not really sure.
Double slit experiment always.
The double slit, that. Think about why does light sometimes behave as a wave and sometimes behave as a particle? And then sometimes things go from being unknown to being known when we get sufficient evidence to prove that they're the case. So let's move on. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. So let's jump back into talking about Socrates. So last time we were talking about his trial and these 4 charges against him. So the first charge is that he's this irreligious scientist out to defeat people or to destroy people's faith in the gods. And Socrates says, well, I don't see anything wrong with studying science. And look at Anaxagoras. He's like a famous scientist and people love him. And so why are you picking on me? And I don't really have any interest in science. And it's this play by Aristophanes, which may be into the sort of wacky madcap scientists, doing all these crazy things and engaging in all these absurd speculations. And come on, it's just a play. That's not the real Socrates. That's like Aristophanes' version, and Aristophanes got it wrong. And then there's the second charge that he's this sophist, which is cashed out in terms of he tries to make the weaker argument defeat the stronger. So I think our translation might say, tries to make the worst cause appear to be better or something like that. But the idea is as a sophist, somebody would pay someone to teach you how to win arguments no matter what, no matter how bad your case is, right? If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. You guys are probably mostly too young to remember the OJ trial, but O.J. Simpson's famously accused of murdering his wife, and just a mountain of evidence against him. But he had a really powerful, well-paid, really smart, clever defense team. And I think Robert Kardashian, I suppose there's a name people still know, the Kardashians. Robert Kardashian, I think, was part of that team. And they won the case, and he was acquitted, even though he's there's like the bloody glove, the trail of blood leading from the house to his Bronco, and from his Bronco to his house. There's a disguise and a bag full of money, and he's like leading the police on a low-speed chase. There's just all sorts of evidence against OJ, and but he had a really good defense team who was paid millions of dollars, and he won his case, and then ended up going crazy and trying to get his Heisman Trophy back and going to jail again, and now recently released. So the saga of OJ. But that's his example, as I used to, and maybe I need a better example now that OJ is kind of dated, of if you pay a lawyer a lot of money, he'll get you off. And the same way, if you pay a political consultant a bunch of money, he'll get you elected to office. Or he'll, what else do people pay? He'll teach you how to win friends and influence people. And so these sophists were sort of like lawyers, political consultants, image consultants, public relations flacks, all these people today that help people, with damage control, with scandal, with with gaming the system, right? So, so Socrates, his defense against this is just, well, I don't take any money for my fees because I don't have anything to teach anybody. I just ask questions, and so that's his defense is and he says, like, ask anybody. I don't have two drachmas to rub together. It's my family lives in poverty. I could be making a lot of money, but I don't. And Socrates seemed to have done it as sort of a matter of personal pride too. And I think this is probably a good defense against the charge that he's a sort of hired gun that will teach you how to pull the wool over other people's eyes. And again, this goes back to this play by Aristophanes, where he's operating the school for con men called the Thinkery, and teaches you how to make a philosophical argument that it's okay to beat your parents, right? And so, this again, it's part of this Greek festival where you make fun of famous people, and Socrates was the butt of all these jokes, and then people start to confuse Aristophanes' version with his version. And this third charge seems to be the big one, that Socrates is sort of troublemaker that goes around and makes fools of people in public, and then encourages youth to do the same. So basically, the idea is he's turned the youth into a bunch of subversives, right? He's teaching them to question authority, to question their elders, to be disrespectful to their parents, to not respect the laws of the city, and so on. And then he has this long-winded story about how this all got started. Well, my friend Chaerephon went to the Oracle of Delphi and said, "Is there anybody wiser than Socrates?" And the Oracle said, "Nobody's wiser than Socrates." And I said, well, that's kind of weird, because I don't think I really know anything about anything. I look at all these puzzles. I think about the nature of virtue and knowledge, and I just go round and round in circles. And all I do is I ask questions. Sometimes I feel like I get a little farther. Sometimes I feel like I haven't made any headway at all, and I find it really frustrating to try to figure things out. So in the gods speak in riddles and puzzles, so maybe there's some metaphorical meaning I'm missing. And he has this idea of disconfirming the hypothesis. So he's gonna, if I can just find a wiser person, I'll know that I can't take it literally. There's got to be some sort of figurative meaning. And so he goes around and starts to ask. This is what supposedly got him into his sort of thing of asking questions. Now, I suppose there's a question about how seriously to take this story, right? This is Socrates' defense. But it may be this is, I suppose, I look at this story with a little bit of skepticism. When did Chaerephon go to the oracle? How long ago did this happen? I would guess that Socrates was asking questions and causing trouble long before this, and this is sort of a convenient excuse. I'm essentially his answer to this is I'm doing my religious duty, right? I'm on a mission from Apollo to find a wiser man. This is like Diogenes going around with his lamp looking for an honest man. This is Socrates looking for a wiser man. And then his conclusion is that he's wise and that he realizes he doesn't know anything. Everybody else is a bunch of pretentious bores who are egomaniacs who think they know everything about anything. And so his mission is basically to show you that you don't know anything by grilling you with questions and showing that your beliefs are filled with hopeless contradictions and logical errors. Right, so that's sort of Socrates' method of cross-examination. He goes up to people and just starts asking questions. And he does this with Euthyphro. There's this dialogue called the Euthyphro where it's spelled, it's like the U in euthanasia, E-U-T-H-Y-P-H-R-O, Euthyphro. And so in the Euthyphro dialogue, Socrates, the setting is actually his case before the city-state of Athens. And they're kind of, I don't know if you ever got like a traffic ticket, right? And stand in line there waiting to pay your fee. And you're sort of sitting around and, what did you do, right? Have you ever had that happen? You find yourself in the pokey, right? And you're like, so what are you in for, right? So Socrates is sitting there on the court waiting for his case, the court house steps waiting for his case to be heard. And he sees his friend Euthyphro. And he's like, Euthyphro, what are you doing here? And Euthyphro says, well, I'm on here because I'm prosecuting my father for murder. And Socrates says, wow, you're prosecuting your own father for murder. You must know a lot about piety. You know, one of the things I'm being charged with is impiety. And so anybody who would prosecute his own father for murder, who did he kill? Oh, a slave. He killed the slave. Oh, why did he kill the slave? Oh, the slave killed another slave. It's like, okay, so there's and actually, he says, well, it wasn't really murder, it's more like manslaughter, right? So it turns out that one slave kills another slave in a drunken rage, and then his father throws him in a ditch and ties him up, throws him in a ditch, and then sends out a messenger to the oracle to find out what he should do. And then by the time the messenger gets back, the slaves died of exposure, right? So he's like, and you know, Euthyphro had these lofty ideals. You know, it doesn't matter who it is and what their station in life, they deserve to be prosecuted. Even if it's your own father, you should make sure that the evildoer, you know, pays for what he did. But Socrates is thinking, okay, well, this is interesting, and so he starts grilling Euthyphro on the nature of piety and definition of piety, and Euthyphro keeps on coming up with this definition of piety or religious duty, because this is what his old case hinges on, and this is a big part of Socrates. He's called a religious heretic. He's being charged with tearing down people's faith in the gods. He's being charged with subverting the youth, and all these things are seen as forms of impiety. So by the end of the dialogue, you know, Euthyphro keeps on coming up with his definitions, and Socrates keeps on showing there's problems with them. And by the end, Euthyphro says, "Well, I got a pressing appointment," and just like takes off. I guess I don't know, it takes a long time to wait to hear your case. So by the end of the dialogue, you're left wondering, like, you know, what's piety? And you basically find out what piety isn't, but you're not really sure what it is. And this is a great example of like Socrates' method is sort of back and forth, and like Euthyphro says, well, piety is that which is beloved of the gods, and so they talk about that, and he says, okay, so if all the gods love it, then it's good, and if all the gods hate it, then it's bad. It's pious and impious. Depends on like what the gods love and what they don't love. And they talk about it for a while and how it seems to work. And he says, but I wonder, like, what if the gods disagree? Because in Greek mythology, you have like the gods are constantly vying for power and supremacy and engage in these fights, right? So, Zeus loves adultery, right? Hera hates adultery, right? So is adultery pious or impious? Ares, the god of war, loves war. Aphrodite, the god of love, loves love, and she is not in favor of war. And you have this play, the Lysistrata, where all the women like hold up in the temple of Aphrodite and are like basically holding out on the men and won't have sex with them until they make peace in the Peloponnesian War. And it's another Aristophanes play. So the gods like disagree on things. Okay, well then, okay. So let's ignore the things that the gods disagree on. It's what all the gods love. Okay, and then they sort of go down, and Socrates shows a problem with that, and he just keeps on, needling Euthyphro on any definition. He says, well, okay, that's an interesting definition. Here's the problem with it, and Euthyphro finally just throws up his hands and says, I give up, and leaves. And this is often like what would happen with Socrates. And I don't know if you ever watched like 60 Minutes. You ever seen like the like ambush interviews they do? Some guys go into an office building and start peppering him with questions. Think about like people that like at the White House press corps, like you shout questions at the president at some event afterwards to try to get, Mr. President, are you a racist? Right? These are the kind of questions that Socrates is asking. Maybe not that sort of, maybe not to that level, but certainly asking people uncomfortable questions they don't want to answer, and in public, right? So you could see how this might get you into trouble, particularly if you're talking to people that are important in the political structure in Athens. So anyway, he had this last criticism, this idea of being a heretic, and he has an interesting response here. Let's see, do I have? think I talked about this, corruption of the youth. So he got this bad reputation for corrupt the youth because he goes around asking questions. And he says basically, how can I can't control what other people do. So if I go around asking questions, and then some of the youth of the city say, I think I'm going to ask some questions of my own. And then suddenly there's an army of Socrates, these layabouts going around grilling their elders on their beliefs. Socrates says, I didn't put him up to it. I'm just doing my thing for Apollo. The heresy charge is interesting. Socrates seemed to have had some non-standard beliefs. And he doesn't really answer the charge directly. And we don't really know much about his religious views. We get kind of an inkling from Plato, but it's hard to distinguish between Plato and Socrates, and there might have been some reasons there. Socrates does mention like a guardian spirit. Let's see if he's... another thing to think about Socrates. Socrates is probably skeptical about, the Olympian pantheon, about this idea of sort of superhuman, anthropomorphic gods with human lusts and drives, constantly at war with one another, and all this, the stories about the gods you find in Greek mythology. So what would happen is like your average person, particularly like slaves, children, believe the myths literally, and then people, they're more sophisticated and particularly intellectuals were more skeptical. Now, Euthyphro, Socrates' friend Euthyphro, they have this discussion, and he says, Socrates says, so do you believe all those like amazing, all those things, the stories about the gods we have in our traditions? And Euthyphro says, every one of them, Socrates. And sometimes I get up in front of the assembly and I talk about these stories and how I believe in them, and how it's important for everyone else to believe in them. And I receive a stony reception. I think maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot by speaking out, but this is what I believe. And Euthyphro was kind of like a religious fanatic, and there were people like that too that were what we might call fundamentalists and active in politics. But you had, I think the majority of people at his time were sort of saw religion as a social support and had some more kind of abstract beliefs about the spiritual world that didn't include anthropomorphic gods. They saw them as symbolic of something else. So Socrates offers this kind of reductio ad absurdum argument, which is this is one of the things you can do in we'll run to this a few times in class here. If you can show that your opponent's view leads to a contradiction, then it can't be true, because a contradiction can't be true. So he says, are you saying I'm a heretic or a complete atheist? And they say, Miletus, who's sort of the lead prosecutor, at least taking point, says, you're a complete atheist, right? Because the idea is, okay, what's the worst thing you can say about somebody? Oh, that they're an atheist. They don't believe in the gods at all. And so he says, okay, well, let's see. Now you're charging me with both being a heretic and an atheist. But how could I be both, right? So if I'm an atheist, then I believe in no gods at all. If I'm a heretic, I believe in gods, just not the state-approved ones. But I can't be both a heretic and an atheist at the same time. So the argument is that basically these charges are disingenuous, that you're just throwing stuff against the wall, like prosecutors have done ever since, and seeing what sticks, and have no basis for the charges. So Socrates is found guilty. The vote's pretty close. This is a huge jury. There's like 500 people on this jury, and the vote is fairly close. Socrates is at the time he's like in his 70s. He's pretty old, and Athens is his home, and he couldn't see living anywhere else. And he could have like got down on his knees and carried on and pleaded and begged for his life, and probably would have got away with banishment. But Socrates actually does the opposite. He dares the jury to give him the death penalty. And remember, so this is like you get I don't know if you've ever had your parents do this to you, but you have like, you do something wrong and you're gonna get a punishment, and then they say, you know, well, Johnny or Janie, what do you think your punishment should be? And then you gotta pick something, right? So if you pick something that's too lenient, you're gonna make your parents angry, right? If you pick something that's too strict, then you gotta put up with the strict punishment. So you wanna find something in the middle, right? You wanna find something that's not too strict and not too lenient. What you don't wanna say is, you know, you break a window of a neighbor with a ball or something, right? Or, and then, you know, what do you think or you get caught shoplifting, right? So, and something, you know, fairly serious, right? And your parents say, well, what do you think your punishment should be? And you say, I think my punishment is, you take me to Disneyland, right? That's the worst thing you could say, right? So this is what Socrates does. He says, I think that my punishment should be treated as a national treasure. There's this big sort of hotel for like basically retired politicians and generals and like the most important people, Olympian athletes. Is this big hotel with servants and everything where you live in high style. And Socrates says, I think that should be my jailhouse, as to put me in this big fancy hotel at state expense and treat me as a national treasure for the rest of my life. That should be my punishment. And so his friends say, no, Socrates, you know, they'll kill you. And so his friends, you know, there's an uproar amongst his supporters. And so he comes back and says, well, my friends have urged me to suggest a penalty fitting of what I've been found guilty of. So I think my punishment should be to pay a small fine, right? Like some equivalent of like a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. And then his friends say, no, Socrates again. And Socrates says, I don't have very much money, so I'll, you know, I think I might be able to come up with $100 or something. And so his friends get him again, and they pool their money together, and Socrates comes up with, I don't know, a $5,000 fine or something, some sort of medium, you know, really small, medium-tiered fine for like a, you know, what could be a capital offense. And so the jury then has to choose between Socrates' penalty, which is a small fine, or the prosecutor's penalty, which is death, and they choose death. So that's and, you know, how much did Socrates really want to win his case? It seemed like he wanted to win because he wanted to be. And he put on a vigorous defense. He wanted to win, but after he's been found guilty, I think in the penalty phase, he's pretty much beyond caring. And he actually says that in his defense, and I think I have this here. So he gets a chance to escape. Like his friends show up in the middle of the night and say, Socrates, bribe the guards, we're gonna bust you out of here. And then Socrates goes on like this long philosophical like argument about why it would be wrong for him to escape, and engages his friends in dialogue. It's called the Crito, with a C. So in the Crito dialogue, it's all about, you get the first expression of what's called social contract theory. This idea there's this implied contract between the individual and the state, such as that the state provides you with certain benefits, and that as part of the contract, that you have to obey the state's laws. And Socrates essentially says that it would be a slap in the face to the state. It would be like slapping your parents in the face and not listening to them after they've done everything for you. And so he, again, seems to have made his peace with the death penalty. He also says, look, the most you can expect of the government is procedural justice. You can't expect justice of outcome because, you know, nobody's perfect, and nobody has that. The best you can do as a state is offer a person a fair trial. You can't expect that every innocent person will be found innocent and every guilty person will be found guilty, and you have to respect the process. The social contract theory. So there's a lot of stuff comes out of this in the end of Socrates' life. And let's see, so here's a famous painting. Death of Socrates. There he is, philosophizing to the end. And there's the cup of hemlock. So hemlock's a poison that paralyzes the body's systems. I think it's a fairly painless thing. I read something else that was disputing that, but I think it just, as it's described in the dialogue, it's a fairly peaceful death, and you sort of, all your limbs turn numb, and then finally you just sort of pass out. Here's Plato, sort of sad and despondent, and I'm not sure what all the other people, his disciples, are in there. I think this might be his family in the background there. They were sent away before the execution. So that he's sentenced to death, and then he makes this argument after he's been sentenced to death. One of the things he says is that he has this guardian spirit that always warns him of danger, and he says, when I walked out of the house today, I didn't get that feeling of foreboding that I always get when something bad's about to happen. It's like he's got, this is Socrates' spidey sense, right? Every time something bad's going to happen, he gets this kind of psychic premonition. He says, it's this guardian spirit that warns him of danger. And he says, I walked out of the house today, and I knew my fate was going to be decided, and I didn't get that feeling. So my guardian spirit didn't warn me. So this is part of his, eccentric religious beliefs. And said, well, I just got sentenced to death, so what's the deal? And he decides that this must mean that, as he's always thought, that death is not an evil. And so he makes an argument for this. So he says, look, death is one of two things. It's either something like an endless sleep, and who doesn't enjoy a good night's sleep, right? Or it's a transition to better life. So either I'll drink the hemlock, everything will go black, there'll be nothingness, and then nothing, an endless sleep. Or I drink the hemlock, and I end up in heaven, and I get to question and cross-examine all the gods and all the heroes of old, and I get to get all my philosophical questions answered. And how great would that be? So then, why do people fear death? Because if death is just nothing, then it's not bad, because nothing can't be bad. Nothing is nothing. Nothing is neither good nor bad. It's the absence of something, right? So or it's something good. So death is either neutral or good. Why do people fear death? And he thinks, well, it must be fear of the unknown. That's why people fear death. Oops. So what do you think about this as an argument? Has anybody ever heard somebody make this argument like today?
Can't remember where, but I've heard that same argument before.
I've heard this in friends, and just random people make this argument talking about life after death, and they're like, well, when I get to be a certain age, death is around the corner. I've lived a good life, and then after I'm dead, nothing can happen to me, right? Because I don't exist anymore. So why should I be bothered about it? They'll say it's the way of all flesh. It's natural, but it's not bad. It's not like I may experience something painful or that I'll suffer physically or psychologically, because I will not be.
I think you look at it more as how others will feel because of it.
Yeah, so maybe people will miss you.
Yeah.
But then that's their suffering.
But that's the sad part to you.
Yeah, it's sympathy.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you should fear personally. Maybe you feel sorry for your loved ones who will miss out on you being around, but nothing bad's going to happen to you. And maybe it'll be, if there is an afterlife, maybe it'll be good. So you can think of...
But I'm saying that's probably what people use to justify the fear of death. Rather than an understanding of because they probably understand, well, death doesn't have any consequences, it's fine. There's no problem with it, but all the other sympathy, I think, kind of brings in that fear.
Is it fear of death or fear of the unknown? That is really the problem with that.
Probably unknown.
They're afraid of what they don't know is going to happen.
Yeah, I think personally, some people that commit suicide typically don't think about, I mean, one of the things is they don't think about other people and the effect they'll have on them. They just they're thinking about themselves and their own problems. And
Do people have a right to be selfish about someone else's death instead of like honoring that they're gonna move on, especially if it was a good death and not a bad death?
that's a good question. I mean, maybe it's okay to be selfish.
Cinco de Mayo, and like a celebration for the dead.
Yeah, the death is not necessarily universally feared, and in some like cultures that have strong faith traditions, see it as just a transition to a better life. And when there's widespread belief in life after death, and it's accepted as true, then people don't worry about it as much. Yeah.
Do you think people are just more afraid of the concept of hell for those who believe in that?
Right. So that might be part of it. This maybe this is a false dilemma. Maybe there's a bad place. So that might be a way you could go with this. So you look at this as a philosophical argument, not just thinking psychologically, but thinking, okay, is death bad? And you could say, okay, well, it's either neutral or good, so it can't be bad. And then you jump to the psychological analysis, right? So, but maybe, but if it might be neutral, it might be good, but also might be bad if there's like a place of suffering. That might be an option. This is an option Socrates doesn't consider, even though the Greeks did have a place called Tartarus, which is a place of suffering that evildoers went to. It might be that Socrates doesn't mention this because he thinks he's lived a virtuous life and doesn't think that he would end up there.
Or he's
Yeah.
a heretic.
I think the fear of death might come from, if you look at it as we have no data from the other side of death, so there's essentially a 50-50 chance of it being nothingness or good, most people wouldn't want to take that chance instead of keeping what they have now, because you know what your life is right now. Most people wouldn't want to take a coin flip for either nothingness or something better.
Yeah, and I think that's what you have now. If you think it's valuable, then it seems like you want to hold on to it. And so it's not necessarily that and I suppose there's a comparative, right? There's like, okay, I like what I have now, and I'm not sure what this thing in the future is going to be. It might be nothing. But there's also this idea that once you die, you're going to miss out on all the things you enjoy now. To the extent that you think your life is worthwhile right now, that you will lose all those positive goods. So what's that?
Like, but for how long? Because otherwise you'd be facing immortality, which seems like a living form of death, unless perfection is just like a matter of time.
Well, so it's the question of like, if you, so let's see, how would we approach this? So you think about like, it would be bad, if it's not bad to die when you're old, would it be bad for you to die tomorrow?
Yeah, because I think part of the reason that death is so scary to people is because they strive for fulfillment or something like that in their lives. And I mean, I don't know if this goes for everyone, but for a majority of people, they never get.
Yeah.
And so then they reach the end of their life and oh, I didn't get this, oh no, and then they die. And so I think that's why it's looked more poorly upon, that like when younger people die, well, they didn't get that long enough chance to try and finish off like the completion of life, whatever that is, definition-wise. But
yeah, maybe that's why it's seen, like, for if a person dies when they're young, it's seen as especially tragic. Why? Because they had their whole life ahead of them.
yeah, they have this whole completion of just so many different tasks.
Yeah, so so there could be a bad place, and also I think that even if there's not, if you don't think that there's a hell, a place of punishment, still there's the idea that death deprives you of all the good things in this life that you would have had you not died. And so the extent that you think that this world is a positive place, and that you have positive values in this life, then death cuts those things short. And I suppose too, you might make the argument that it doesn't matter whether you're 7 or 70, it's just that the degree to which you're going to miss out on things, it will be there, but not necessarily it's not a difference in kind. So it might be that when Socrates, you think about people, actually, particularly academics, they do some of their best work in their later years in life, because it takes a while to sort of get mastery in a field. And you look at what's her name? Sue Grafton just died this last summer. She writes these alphabet mysteries, and she just finished Y is for, I can't remember what Y is for, but they're like A is for alibi, and so the gimmick is they all start with the letter of the alphabet. And she writes these mysteries, and she got to the letter Y as she wrote this summer, but she got cancer, and I think she's 77, about Socrates' age when he was executed. And there will never be a Z is for, nobody will know what Z is for, because she might have started, but she didn't finish it. So why? Because death cut short her literary career, even though she had 30 books to her name, right? Something like that. We'll never read Z is for whatever Z was for. And academics too. You think about, and had the academic lived longer, what they might have come up with.
Yeah, right. Nietzsche finished the reevaluation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, think about there's lots of, and there's people that wrote like really big books when they were really young. I think about authors that died young, like the guy that wrote Gatsby, or F. Scott Fitzgerald, I think died fairly young. Stephen Crane, I think. And maybe they would have been a one-hit wonder, but it might be they would have created a whole lot of stuff. And so you think about like the productivity and just the experiences that a person can have in life. Now the question is have it even better, right? So that might be a question. But it seems that at least it's rational for you to fear death, given that you don't know what it's going to be and you know that you enjoy your life now.
Do you watch Black Mirror at all?
Watch what?
Black Mirror.
I do not.
You would like it.
I watched this episode last night where this lady gets hit by a truck and she's in a coma. And they come out with this new tech that basically allows them to take her consciousness and place it into someone's brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of space in there. So.
Right.
And so they transfer her consciousness into the husband. And so she's literally just in his brain. She sees everything. She can't do anything about it, though. She feels everything like that. But I think it's kind of an interesting segue from instead of death, would it be better to have the eyes view and no control?
Oh.
Or would you rather have that blissful sleep? I mean,
Yeah.
which one would be better?
There's a marriage made in hell for you.
Yeah.
Living inside. So it seems like this idea of an endless sleep is kind of a romantic way, of putting like the absence of whatever good things are in your life. Like there was this. I remember when I was in high school, there's a song that came out called "Don't Fear the Reaper," and it sort of romanticizes death and suicide. and I remember there was this girl in the class that said that if she wasn't dead by 30, she would commit suicide because she didn't want to be like her mother. Typical teenager, like the angsty teenager. And but this, you think about what you miss if you do that. And I would hope that as she grew up and matured, she came to terms with her relationship with her mother and lived on to live a fruitful and happy and long life. And she's still around. This argument later is picked up by Epicurus. He was Epicurean philosopher. But the Epicureans and Stoics both had this idea of getting rid of irrational fears. And Epicurus said, look, if you're always quaking your boots about the possibility of some sort of place of torment after you've died and being punished, it's going to rob you of whatever enjoyment you will have in this life. So don't spend your whole life worrying about death. Spend your life enjoying your life, and then just accept what comes after. Yeah.
You could also think about this as just as biological organisms, there wouldn't be any species surviving that looked forward to death. Everything has to try to avoid death in order to continue existing as a whole. So
yeah, it seems like we're programmed to do that evolutionarily, right?
Yeah, whether you look at it via evolution or creation or whatever, if something tries to veer towards death, as a species, it's going to go extinct. So it's almost not a conscious thing, it's just something.
Biology has resistance to death.
Yeah,
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 it has
yeah.
to die, otherwise we'd run out of room.
Yeah.
And then like, it would just
Yeah.
be like filled with a bunch of immortal.
But usually, yeah, we're saying it just fights against it.
That's why it's really, it's
Weird.
it's
Yeah.
it's really hard. It's really difficult to commit suicide, and it's really difficult to kill somebody else. It's not like you see it in the movies.
Yeah.
It's a pretty horrific thing because of the survival impulse. And on that happy note, let's take our 10-minute break. hear those harmonics at a good time. Here we are. Thanks. Okay.
My school schedule's
So
super
let's,
easy. Before this class, I had meditation.
I almost took that course.
you have a meditation class here?
It's really nice. I have meditation and yoga every single day of the week. And then I make music for an hour.
We used to have Buddhist meditation traditions until they chopped it. So,
Totally would have taken that.
all right, let me, oh, sorry, find my PowerPoint. I had the screens fixed here too.
I like your new slides, the backgrounds to them.
Oh.
I appreciate them.
Okay, where are we at? Oh, just a bit about, I think I actually might, let's just jump right into the mind-body problem. There's some stuff at the end of chapter 1 about the branches of philosophy. If you have any questions about those, feel free to ask next time. I want to move right into the mind-body problem. I thought I'd opened that up. Oh, is this it? This is it. Is here a little drab from last time? The mind-body problem. To start out with the mind-body problem, you have to talk a bit about ontology. So ontology is the study of being, the B-E-I-N-G, the study of being and existence. And the question is like, what is the world made of? And so there's 3 basic answers. One is idealism. That's the idea that everything is made of a spirit, or sometimes it's put in terms of things being made of mind. And often those mind and spirit are used interchangeably, particularly in the Eastern mystical traditions. But the idea is that the physical world is somehow an illusion or a manifestation of the spiritual world, which is what really or truly exists. And Plato seems to have a view like that. He talks about the physical world being mere shadows cast from some spiritual reality of a world of ideas. The flip side of this is materialism, the idea that everything is physical. So we talked a bit about Democritus, who says that it's all atoms in the void, that it's particles of matter in empty space, and that if they're gods, they're made of atoms too. And everything that exists is composed of material substance. So that's materialism, saying that only the physical world exists, and there is no spiritual world, and that minds are well, actually, I don't want to jump ahead of myself. And then there's dualism, which says there's both material and physical substances in the world. And then when we come to the mind-body problem, there's mind-body dualism that says that a human being is a combination of immaterial substance, a soul or a mind, and the physical body. So the question is put in different ways depending on which of these ontological views you have. So if you're an idealist or a materialist, the question is, if mind and body are the same, why do they seem different? Right? If these are different aspects of the same fundamental substance, why do mind and body seem like such different phenomena? And why does it seem really hard to account for the mind in terms of the physical world? And why does it seem so hard to account for the physical world in terms of sort of an underlying spiritual world? It seems like the physical world is real, and also it seems that it's very difficult to account for consciousness in terms of the physical world. So that's the mind-body problem for the idealist and the dualist, is if mind and body are the same, made of the same substance, why do they seem different? And then the question for the dualist is, okay, if they're fundamentally different substances, how do they interact? So if mind is made of spiritual substance, and if the body is made of a physical substance, how do the two work together? How do they causally affect one another? So that's the mind-body problem. Any questions about what the problem is or definitions of any of these terms?
Will be on the test.
It will be. As a matter of fact, they'll have question. Idealism is the view that only the physical world exists. B, the view that only the spiritual world exists. Z, the view
If
that
idealism only believes in a spiritual world, then how do they explain the world around them?
So let's see. Somebody in your meditation class might say this. It's that the physical world is an illusion. This is like part of the teachings of Hinduism. They have this term called Maya, which is basically translated illusion. And the idea of the world is it's a manifestation of the ultimate reality or God, and that the physical world around us is an illusion. And the distinction between you and a God, between you and the physical world, between you and other people, between you and other physical objects is all part of the illusion that everything is one, and that any difference or otherness is part of the illusion of this world. And when you meditate, you transcend those differences and you have this sort of feeling of oneness. I don't know, you ever get that feeling of oneness when you meditate?
I mean, it's really good for you, but it's not as magical as they always say it is. No, but
There's different kinds of meditation
because
too.
I wouldn't disagree with idealism in saying that reality isn't necessarily an illusion. Because I mean, most of what you see is actually happening inside you, not what's happening outside. Isn't letting know what's known, like what things look like. It's that little thing that's wobbling, gooing around there that's in a dark room that's trying to figure everything out just by the senses you have. So I mean, it's kind of an illusion, but
not maybe.
But it's like a
totally,
materialistic illusion. Okay.
So that like in Zen Buddhism also have this idea of the oneness of everything, and they'll say you need to sit quietly, empty your mind, and and do that for like long stretches of time, and eventually you'll get this like sensation or feeling that's sort of indescribable, other than it's about the oneness and unity of all things. And the idea is that you're transcending the physical world and realizing that there's this sort of underlying spiritual reality.
I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
just
So for like idealism, would it technically be then like we're all dead or like basically like sleeping but we're just dreaming or having a hallucination that this is happening? Would that be like one of their arguments?
Yeah, that could be like I suppose like it's an epistemological argument or an argument about knowledge. Like, how do we know we're not dreaming? How do we know the physical world is real? Because all we have is sensations, right? So I could say, well, I know this table is real because I can feel it with my hands and knock on it, it makes a sound, it's solid. But actually physics says that this table is mostly empty space, and that it's what is it? It's the 11 something. It's like quantum strings vibrating in 11-dimensional hyperspace or something, right?
string theory.
Yeah, it's just like so. And what do I have to go on? I just have like tactile sensations, auditory sensations, visual sensations, right? Those are sensations. How do I know those sensations represent some external reality, and how do I know it's a physical reality? And what does it mean to say it's a physical reality? There's a famous philosopher named George Berkeley that the institute, the UC Berkeley was named after him, and there's that. I don't want to get into why like they say Berkeley now, but it's actually Berkeley. He's European philosopher. So he's but anyway, it's so Berkeley, spelled like Berkeley, is this philosopher and basically makes this argument and says, God created this world of sensations and ideas, and the physical world is a theory cooked up by atheists and skeptics to try to tear down people's faith in God. And then and most people write Berkeley off as a lunatic, But then the problem is when you try to refute Berkeley, it's really hard to do. You just end up saying, well, this is a famous philosopher, I don't know if you really call him a philosopher, intellectual, Samuel Johnson. He said, I refute him thus, and like kicked a rock, right? And it's like, look, here's a real rock, and kick it, see it exists. So, but Berkeley would just say, well, that's just like the sensation of heaviness, right? It's a sensation of seeing certain shapes and objects. But then where's the proof of a reality beyond your sensations? So that's a big epistemological problem in philosophy. Descartes has his own answer to that we won't do in this class. This is a class in metaphysics. But that might be something they would say. But they'll say like this idea that the fundamental reality of the world is spiritual. Plato had this idea that ideas are real, and that the physical world is sort of a manifestation of these ideas. So he thinks about the concept of, say, humanity, and then there's like individual people, and those people are representations of this abstract object. Now we think about abstract object as just being conventional, like we think about that as a way of thinking about particular objects which really exist. We think about abstract objects as not existing. Plato has this idea the abstract object is real and the particulars are an illusion, or at least less real. But there's this idea that everything's in Hinduism, everything's a manifestation of the Brahman, which is the Hindu god or the ultimate reality. There's an ancient theory called Gnosticism that was a similar. It was an early, like a Greek religion, and it sort of incorporated elements of Christianity. And people had similar views. And you can see, like throughout the world, there are these mystical traditions that say the world around us, the sensations and sights and sounds, the material world is misleading. It's an illusion, and it's hiding some underlying spiritual reality. And if you pray, meditate, go inward, that you will find that ultimate reality. So that's the idealist view. The materialist view is the one more associated with the modern world and modern science, and this idea that material reality is real, and that the physical world is an illusion cooked up by, maybe probably early on, like they see religion, the materialists will see religion as sort of primitive scientists trying to figure out the world, people trying to come up with explanations of the world before science, and people coming up with like personalist explanations for impersonal phenomena, like the stories about kidnapped goddesses, as opposed to like thinking about the weather in terms of pressures of air and temperature inversions and discharges of electricity from the friction of clouds rubbing together, say. So we have idealism, materialism, and then dualism tries to make peace with both these views and says, look, there is a physical world, it does really exist, but there's also a spiritual world, and the two of them come together in the human person. And we're going to look at some dualist answers and really focus on those. I think with the idealism, we're not going to really do much about that. Idealism is big in the East, not so much in the West. And I think we might talk about it when we talk about personal identity. We'll talk a bit about it. But I think that the ideal, this maybe more belongs in the epistemology class, which doesn't exist anymore. But we used to deal with the question of the proving that the physical world exists is a traditional problem of philosophy, but more of a problem of knowledge or epistemology than of reality or metaphysics, which we deal with in this class. So let's look at some dualist answers, since most people are dualists or materialists in this culture. And this is maybe where like most of the traditional philosophy is Western philosophy is designed around these questions of dualism versus materialism seem to be the big contenders. So Cartesian interaction. This is Descartes. So I gave you a little excerpt from Descartes. I know the style is sort of difficult, and if you get an older translation. Descartes, even with the modern translations, is sometimes a little hard to read. But his idea is that the mind and body interact in some mysterious way in the pineal gland. Most people call it the pineal gland. I don't know what the preferred pronunciation is. I've heard it both ways. There's this little gland in your brain, and at the time nobody knew what it did. Now it seems like it secretes various hormones and seems to have something to do with the libido. So, and I think Descartes just found this gland. He was really interested in physiology. He did a lot of dissecting of corpses, and wanted to figure out. This is like back, this is a long time ago. This, he's writing in the 16th century, trying to figure out some of this stuff, and so he has this idea that you have a soul, but you also have a body, and the two of them need to sort of talk to each other and interact in some way, and so you're an embodied soul, and this all must happen someplace in the brain, and he guessed that it was in the pineal gland. He says it's kind of like gravity. So this is pre-Newton, right? So now I think we know that gravity is like a warp in the four-dimensional time-space field or something. At the time, nobody knew why gravity worked, but you can see its effects, right? So his idea was this: we know that it happens. We know that mind affects body and body affects mind. We're just not sure how it all works out, but we accept the fact that it happens. Can you think of what would be an example of the mind affecting the body or the body affecting the mind? Either way.
Would that be like a concussion, erasing memories or something like that? Or?
Yeah, so you get a big hit on the head and you can't remember stuff. So that's an example of your brain affecting your mind, or your brain part of your body. You get brain damage that affects your consciousness. Can't remember what happened, right? How about another example of your physical body affecting your consciousness? Your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, emotions.
Like phantom limb, people who get their legs or arms amputated, they can still feel it even though it's not there.
Yeah, and that's the question about what's going on there. I suppose that's your body affecting your mind, and that you feel that your limb's there when it's really not, because there's something about like the way your brain communicates with your limbs, and your brain sort of thinks it's there.
Well, they do that test too, where they put a fake arm, they cover you and they brush your real hand, and then they brush the fake hand. Oh, I feel it. And then they come over and stab the hand out of nowhere. They freak out because they think it's actually their arm, because their brain, just from that view, perceives that our arms usually line up around here. So anything that lines up and looks like my arm is going to be my arm.
And some of these end up being kind of like weird. You think about, is it your body? Is it your nervous system, or in your brain, or is it your mind? And maybe it gets a little muddy. How about some other like this sort of typical like everyday examples where something happens in your body and then you have something happen in your mind as a result?
If you see something and it jogs your memory, like if you put a sticky note somewhere with just one or two words, it can remind you of a whole event that you have to do.
Yeah, I read a word and I think about a thing I got to do. Sure. How about like I watch a really sad movie, like I watch Star Trek To the Wrath of Khan, and at the end there's Captain Kirk's moving funeral oration where he says of Spock, of all the souls he's met in the universe, his was the most human. And so you can see that frog in his throat, and you think and you're like, oh, Spock is dead, and a little tear wells up in your eye, right? That's your tear duct says, oh, time to produce some tears, right? Because something's sad. That's a physical reaction, right? So you can be watching a sad movie, or maybe somebody gives you some bad news in real life, and maybe it's going to cause you or you get really angry, right? And then all of a sudden you're like trying to tell somebody off, and your throat closes up, and you're like, and your voice sounds all hoarse and weird, right? So there's all sorts of things, and it might be somebody, it's just like an auditory sensation, right? Somebody says Trump, you're like, oh, right? Or you have the visceral reaction. People go wacko. How about
It's the habits of the brain that kind of dictate why we do things.
yeah, so you can like be triggered, like have an emotional response, and certain people get triggered by like they have a bad experience and something reminds them of it, and all of a sudden they get a spike of adrenaline, right? Your heart starts beating really fast. Or if you're like giving a presentation in front of a class and you get nervous, you start sweating.
That's when meditation actually helps.
Yeah, so that's a handy thing for that. What's an example of this is all example of like, sexual arousal, right? Can be you have a stimulus and something you just experience, and it might be a thought in your head, right? And so you think about you think about something sexy, and all of a sudden, you get physiological responses. That's the mind and body working together, because it could just be like a random thought comes through your head. How about like a case of the body affecting the mind? But what about like getting drunk, right? I don't know if anybody. I've never been drunk myself, but I know people I know, they drink copious amounts of alcohol. They drink alcohol. They smoke weed. They take other things, right? And they have altered states of consciousness, right? So you have your emotions change. And then like even like if you drop acid or something, right? You're gonna like see the colors and start having different sensations and Aldous Huxley wrote this book called The Doors of Perception, talking about hallucinogenic drugs and how they affect consciousness. Some people have epiphanies. You have all sorts of experiences, right? And it's messing with your brain. But it's consciousness that's changing, right? You're having different experiences based on different things going on in your physical body. Okay, so then the question is like, what do you make of that? If there's, it seems like things go both ways, right? Your body affects your mind, and your mind affects your body. Now it seems like this is really easy to explain as a materialist. You'd say, well, it's just your mind just is your brain, right? So you drop acid, you have like your brain does these weird things, and you have hallucinations. Same thing if you get, if you drink enough alcohol, you have hallucinations. Or maybe you like have a blackout and can't remember what you did, right? Memories don't exist in the soul, they exist in your brain. And so if you pickle your brain with the copious amounts of alcohol, you're not going to be able to remember things too well. A fairly simple explanation. And you explain like things like hunger and sexual arousal and the evocation of emotions like sadness and depression. It's not happening in your soul. It's all related to brain chemicals. This is why when you take antidepressants, you get take one of those serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and suddenly you don't feel so bad about your life. Does the SSRI work on your soul? No, it works on your brain. So this works really well for the materialist. The dualist is left trying to explain like how this is happening. If there are these two fundamental substances, why does your mind affect your body and your body affect your mind? Particularly when it's like material substance and spiritual substance. How do those like work together? It seems like it would be like, your soul is sort of like this ghostly immaterial entity, according to Descartes, that doesn't occupy space. And it would be like, I don't know, the movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze, right? Where he goes to embrace his beloved Demi Moore when she's there at the pottery wheel, and his arms go right through her because she's immaterial and she's material and he's immaterial. How can the immaterial affect the material in a like cause and effect sense?
Raising a penny up the wall.
What's that?
Sliding a penny up the
Yeah,
wall.
I suppose you could do that as part of it too. So we actually can affect the physical world. But how is that supposed to work? How can a immaterial substance work on a material substance? So Descartes says, well, we know that it happens. We really don't know how. But he says, look, we know that mind and body are different because they're conceptually distinct. So you can think about like, let's see. Maybe I'll call it my starboard here.
How are they conceptually different?
So you think about like mind and body. Let me. Oops. Darn it. I didn't want to do that. How do we go back?
Everything in your body's intelligent enough to assort themselves into extremely complicated structures, and then bind all of that with a brain made of, I mean, technically the same kind of stuff.
That wasn't supposed to happen. He just redid the board here. I didn't want to do that either. Well, that works now. Not sure what's going on here. Give me a second, I might just talk. There's that. Somehow I made this whole thing disappear.
Yeah, definitely shouldn't be doing what it's doing.
I don't want to draw shapes. And every time I draw, it does that. That's strange. Well, they just reset the monitor here, so maybe I'll leave this for now.
Maybe close the program and open it back up.
Yeah, that might be a thing. I don't think I wrote on there yet.
If you go to all programs at the bottom left.
Oh, there we go, run.
To the
Oh, all programs, there it is. I'm not used to a PC, I got a Mac. There we go. See what happens. It's riveting TV.
It still doesn't work.
Does it come in? There it is. Now you get retained. Oh, there it is. Hallelujah. Just make sure not to do that again. Okay, I think this will, let's see if this will work. We got mind and body.
Nice.
So then you think about these two things, like the mind, like you can think about like what's the mind, what are the contents of the mind? What's in your mind?
Memories.
Like ideas, right? Beliefs, memories, maybe feelings. Descartes wants to identify feelings and emotions like more with the body, but I think that.
Yeah, but where does it all stem from?
And then the body. Think about like the physical world, and maybe I should say. Descartes talks about mind and body, and sometimes he's talking about like your mind and just the physical world, not necessarily like your head, arms, legs, torso. He's talking about the physical world, material bodies. But you think about physical objects. Well, you think about things that qualities like true or false, or say abstract and concrete. Now the question is, what kind of qualities do physical objects have? Do they have the same as mental things? So you have mental things and physical things, and maybe I should say, I'll just change this to matter, just to be clear. you can sum up all philosophy in 2 statements.
Rocks don't have beliefs.
I mean, that's what I'm
Maybe.
looking for here, yeah. But no, I was thinking, what is mine? No matter. What is matter? Never mind. Okay, enough dry philosophy jokes. So matter, you think about the material world, things have like, what, shape, size, density, mass, right? Yeah, do rocks have emotions? Do beliefs have shape? Like what shape is my belief that it's 2:32 p.m. Or what color is the concept of justice? Right? It doesn't make any sense. Now, like beliefs, like color and shape and size and maybe density, temperature, right? Might be another attribute of physical objects. Something can be hot or cold. Is the principle of non-contradiction? Is that what temperature is that typically? Like I could say, like if I pick up, like snow is cold, right? So, but I can't say that. What about the idea of snow? I suppose it's cold because it's about snow that's cold, but the idea itself isn't cold. Or I think if I have an idea, if I'm thinking about the concept of a triangle, is the concept of a triangle triangular? Like, is there, in my soul, is there like a triangular shape in my soul? You run into all these paradoxes, and you think about representation isn't literal. Like, if I'm thinking of the Eiffel Tower, is there a giant Eiffel Tower, like a sort of mental version of it in my mind? And is it the same size as the real Eiffel Tower? My soul would have to be really big. If I'm thinking about the planet Jupiter, does my soul have to be as big as the planet Jupiter? So the idea is these are just mental representations that your soul doesn't have like a size or a shape.
Guess.
Yeah, these are all representations of the physical world. And Descartes would say also the spiritual world, like if you have an idea of God, that would be a representation of something in the spiritual world.
All
So-
the brain does is take best guesses. Like, I was watching this thing on how if your brain wasn't as equipped as it is with recognizing shapes, the whole world would look different to you. So they put in this simulation of what it might look like if your brain was like more predisposed to like trying to picture dogs in shapes. So your recognition was leaning towards dogs. And most of the things that would pop up in your world, just slightly, if it was anywhere near that shape, your brain would recognize it as a dog. And so it basically looks like you're tripping. But that's what would happen if you had a different mindset of like how to recognize things. And so when people are bad at that.
Yeah, and that's like a big part of the way our brain works, and you sort of get used to recognizing certain shapes and see them as indicative of other things, and maybe that's you say about perception is perception of the material world that has certain qualities. But then you sort of think about those things and process them. And there's the initial thing you're talking about, and maybe there's differences in what you expect, and that actually affects like the content of your mind. But then you think about the content of consciousness. You think about your ideas and beliefs and the qualities that they have, and the things in your mind versus the things in the world, they're different. The things in your mind are ideas and concepts and beliefs. Yeah, put concepts in here. Fit it. Concepts. And they're true and false, so they could be abstract or concrete. Could be the concept of of justice, or it could be like the idea of Borrowdale's thermos bottle, right? So that's an abstract or a concrete idea. But objects aren't abstract or concrete, right? There's no distinction in material objects. So you can't take, this is Descartes' point, you can't take the qualities that apply to matter and apply them to mind and mind to matter, and it shows you that they're fundamentally different substances. They're conceptually distinct.
Or are you comparing body with matter?
Yeah, so your body's like part of the material world.
Hmm.
So then when you think about like your mind or your soul, it's a distinct substance from your body. And his idea is that it's let's see, where's my mind and body are conceptually distinct.
But would you be able to have all the benefits of what the mind can do if you had no body? Because the eyes are part of the body, the ears, the mouth, everything is a part of the body except for the brain. But you can't experience anything without any of those.
But that's not what his argument is. It's the.
Is it the emotion side or the idea side?
When he's saying mind, he's not saying your physical brain, but your consciousness. So what's going on inside your brain is different from even the lump of goo in your head that makes up that brain.
Yeah, and he would say that
So
your
it's more like a
brain is
dualist
just,
view of
that
it.
your mind is conceptually distinct
Okay.
from your brain too. That your brain is just an interface between mind and body, and
Oh,
this all
okay, I
happens
see
in
what
the
you're saying.
pineal gland. But you have a soul, and when you die and shuffle off this mortal coil, you'll still have consciousness, you'll still have your beliefs and memories, and you will still exist as a consciousness, but you won't have a body anymore. Let's see, and that's like the dualist idea, is that your body is an independent substance. It can exist on its own. So that's part of what distinguishes
The top left from
actual
current
full.
slide.
What's that? Yeah, let me see if I can.
The top left from current
Right,
slide.
right. The so we think that they're conceptually different, and we'll get into some arguments for this. But his idea is that that there's substance dualism, which is actually strong dualism, which says that your mind is made of an independent substance that exists even after the death of the body. And sometimes there's another view called weak dualism, which is actually what we're just going to get to here. Epiphenomenalism says that mind and body are conceptually distinct, and they are different substances. Well, they're different things, but they're not different substances. So epiphenomenalism wants to say that, also called, oops, did I? A second here. Okay, let's just talk about epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism is this idea that your mind is caused by your brain. It's the effect of your brain. But your mind really doesn't do anything. So the idea is that the causal relation only goes one way. So so the epiphenomenalists are sort of like materialists with caveats. So that they'll say, okay, it's considered to be a dualist view, but the idea is that your brain is the primary substance. But your brain, when it operates, it creates consciousness. And consciousness is like an emergent property of the operation of your brain. And so as your brain processes information, it creates a sort of illusion of the person and this phenomena called consciousness through the firings of millions of neurons, and you get sort of this idea of me-ness, that you're a person, of personal identity, and you have these thoughts and experiences and emotions and beliefs, and it's all being caused by your brain. When you die, your brain gets starved of oxygen, and then it starts to decay, and you lose consciousness from lack of oxygen, and then that's it, and there's no substance. And they think about it as being like, you can think about it as being like a car, right? So you could say, like, when you turn on the ignition on a car and the engine runs, that's the operation of the car. If you blow a head gasket and your engine seizes up and if catastrophic failure, the car's not going to run anymore. you don't ask like, well, where did the running of the car go? It's just, there is no running of the car distinction from the operation of the pistons and all the different systems in the car and the combustion. It's just the running of the car is what the car does when it's going. And if the car has catastrophic failure, the car just doesn't run. There's no like sort of spiritual version of the car running. So similarly, the epiphenomenalists will say, well, once your brain stops operating, consciousness disappears. There's an example that goes back to Plato. He thinks about it as being like a musical instrument, right? So a musical instrument produces music. If you take the instrument and you bash it to pieces, it's not going to make any more music. You don't ask where the music went, right? So the instrument produces music, but the music just sort of, it's ethereal. It hangs around as long as the instrument's making music, the music exists. The music is different from the instrument, but and the music is produced by the instrument. It's a different thing than the instrument, but once the instrument's destroyed, there's no more music. Another analogy is that you think about like the level of gas in your gas tank, and then like your gas gauge, right? If you want to know how much gas you have, you look at your gas gauge. Why? Because there's some physical level of gas in your gas tank that determines what it's going to read. It doesn't matter if you take a hammer and bash your gas gauge, right? It's not going to change the physical level of gas in your gas tank. So your gas gauge doesn't really do anything. If you like cracked open the gauge and you're like empty and took the needle and forced it up to the full position, it's not going to do anything, right? So in the same way, like you think about it as being like smoke and fire, right? So fire is like your physical body, and smoke is the effect of your brain. And so you think about fire, it does something. It's burns stuff up. The smoke doesn't do anything; it just sort of hang around in a cloud. And the epiphenomenalists think about consciousness as just sort of being this cloud of experiences that hangs around your brain when it operates. So that's the epiphenomenalist view. So it's trying to hold on to the conceptual distinction between mind and body, but kind of pitch it in a kind of pseudo-materialist way. That's why it's called sometimes weak dualism. So the idea is that mental phenomena are dependent on physical phenomena. They're produced by physical phenomena, but they're distinct from it. Okay, here's a wacky view. So it's parallelism or occasionalism. And so the idea of parallelism or occasionalism, and remember, this is trying to explain like, why does it seem like mind and body interact with one another, and how can a physical and immaterial substance interact with one another? Epiphenomenalism says, well, it just goes one way, and it's just the consciousness is kind of a byproduct of the operation of your brain. And that seems a little more plausible than sort of the ghostly mini-me driving around your body. And to be fair to Descartes too, Descartes says, if you think about your soul and your body, it's not like a pilot in a ship. It's not like you're sort of this ghost in the machine and you're riding around your body and you're pressing buttons and your arm goes up. It's you think about your body as being you. And when your body gets damaged, it's not like you see barnacles at the bottom of your ship. Like you feel intimately connected to your body and commingled with it in a way that a pilot and a ship are not connected. So Descartes recognizes that it seems like your body is you, but he says if you think about it abstractly or conceptually, you see that's kind of an illusion, and really there's a difference between the two. It's just that they're sort of so intermixed in such an intimate way, it's hard to remember that they're different things. So the epiphenomenalists say, well, they are different, but one creates the other, one's dependent on the other, that your mind's dependent on your body, and once your body is destroyed, your mind will be no more. Parallelism or occasionalism is a strong dualist view. So it says there's both a soul and a body, and both are independent substances that can exist on their own. And then it tries to explain, like, how does mind affect body and body affect mind? How can an immaterial substance affect a material substance? And it basically says they don't. That mind and body are parallel processes that run side by side but never interact. And so how does this work? Well, this is from the philosopher Leibniz, and he had this idea that at the beginning of time, God created the physical world and the spiritual world, both of which have sort of series of cause and effect, where only physical things cause physical things, and spiritual things cause spiritual things. So there's all the causes leading up to, say, my decision to take a drink. So he would say, on the occasion that Professor Borrowdale's hand is on his drink and he feels thirsty, his physical body will follow suit and he'll take a drink. And furthermore, that my desire to take a drink just now, to quench my thirst and provide a philosophical example, is totally unrelated to my body just doing that thing that it did. My arm moving up in this sort of motion. And how is this? Well, it might look like, I might think that when I have a desire and then my body follows suit, that one's causing the other. But he says that's really an illusion. And it's sort of like, if you think about, like, say you're watching a movie, right? Now, the movie soundtrack and the picture are on different systems, right? There's a little sound strip on films. They might have separate systems now, but in many movies, at least in the past, you have like, you record them differently too. If you're doing like a professional production, you got some sound guy there with like a boom mic, or somebody's wearing like a little lapel mic, right? The sound's going in a different place. You're recording it differently than the picture, which is being recorded on the camera, right? And what happens is that you take those two things, you get in the editing room and you sync them up. And then when you have the final product, you're sitting there in the theater and the sound's coming out of the speakers and the picture is being projected from the back onto the screen there. And they're two totally different processes. But if they're synced up, you think when the character on the screen, when his mouth is moving and you hear the words, you see them as being causally related. You think, oh, more bad acting from Matt Damon or whatever, right? He delivered that line really poorly. But really what's going on is that, there's a visual image of his mouth moving, and then you're hearing the words in the speaker, and they're synced up. And then if it's dubbed or something really poorly and it's like a kung fu movie, that they don't match up, right? So his idea is that God set up the world like this so that the tracks of the physical and mental world go side by side, and that every time you have an intention, your physical body follows suit. And God knew from the beginning of time that I would want to take a drink and move my hand thus, and then arrange all the deterministic physical causes to lead up to that event. But it's not caused by desire, it's caused by other physical things. And thus, only physical things cause physical effects, and spiritual things cause spiritual effects. And you think that's a kooky view? It is, but a really smart guy came up with it. So next time we'll talk about why would such a smart guy, the discoverer of calculus, come up with such a wacky book.